Very Colorado mountain people, fun times. Yeah. That's how this recording is going to start, is talking about your mug. Anyway. All right, take it away.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my apologies for committing our heresy and working in a notebook here, but it seemed like the easiest way to work in the scheduler. That would also let me show you some other features I wanted to illuminate. All these methods would work perfectly fine in RStudio. You'll just have a slightly different interface, and you'll where here I'm going to run them, cell by cell in a notebook. In RStudio, you just have to run the line or whatever instead of running the cell. And of course, this is a notebook, so I get to do like semi-fun markdown stuff. So cool. Okay, without further ado, hopefully everyone can see this. I'll zoom in just a little. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of talk through briefly how you can deal with files in R. Probably many of you already know a lot of this, but then at the end, I'll also show you how you can use this to get files out of the Jupyter Hub environment and onto the CDPHE network drives, sometimes called Isilon by OIT and sometimes called the KJH drives by us. So let's get into it. Okay, so if you want to work with files, you got to work with file paths. File path, right, is just the address of the file or a way to uniquely designate where the file is on your machine. Now, as you may have noticed, like when you go to create a new file, if you give it the same name as another file, the computer gets mad at you. But if you're in a different folder and you create the same name of the file, no one gets mad. And that's because the system needs a unique address. And if you use the same name, it's fine if it's in different folders because the folder is part of the address, right? But anyway, first step to getting where you want to go is knowing where you are to start with. And that's where this method, getWD or get working directory, is useful. So in your local machine, it'll probably be something like C:\users home or something like that. But in the Jupyter Hub scheduler, you will be in this home/Jovian the directory, and that's where you land as kind of the first page you see. Don't ask me much about Jovian. That's kind of an archaic Jupyter thing, and yeah, worth noting, you can't actually go up a level to the Jovian or home folders. You're always down one step, so you're always here. Okay, a couple fun things you can do. You can list some files. Awesome. You can also list files that are not in your working directory if you specify the file path to the other folder. So here I'm listing the files in the Isilon folder, but that folder is empty. So yeah, nothing came up. But if you like, we can create one and then you can double check that it works. So test me, great name for a file. And now when I run this, there it is. Oh yeah, and I finally saw this folder that we had. Okay, cool. Another thing that you might find helpful sometimes is to check if a file exists. So this is useful, like if you want to avoid accidentally overwriting an existing file, or if you want to know if the file exists before you start creating duplicates, you can just run file exists. It returns true or false depending on whether the file's there. So I have test file. Obviously that one doesn't exist, but you can see pwd.txt is there. So when I run that, I get true, right? Okay, cool. So now I'm going to just load some data in. It's literally just my immunization records, so very exciting stuff. And actually, it's not even my record, it's just my person. So there you go. Okay, good. So then now what I did in this last bit is I wrote that to a CSV. Probably, again, you've all probably done this, but now you can see there's a CSV here. I didn't give any kind of fully qualified path, right? I didn't give the path starting from home. I just gave it the name of the CSV. And so the method defaults to creating the CSV right where it was, right? You could, like I alluded to above, use file exists to make sure it's there before you overwrite it. So if I delete this little if statement just checks if it's false that the file exists, then tell us that it's been created for the first time and created. Right. So now I can run this. And then the next time I run this, it doesn't do anything. And so I can be confident that I'm not going to overwrite my file if I, for whatever reason, needed to check that. Right. What I'm going to do in the next bit, which is slightly messy, actually, I can just delete some of these and use that in a minute. I'm going to create files iteratively by using a variable in the middle of the name of the file. So this is very basic, but I just did, I created a variable called iterator, assigned it to start at 1, and then I create a file for every iteration that I go through. So the way I created the file name, and maybe there's better ways, but I used paste to take the case sample that I used as the beginning, add the iterator number, and then put the file extension .csv. You do have to specify the CSV because you can actually save files in a number of formats, and they will either work or not work depending what you do. So if you run through this, it's going to get a new name, write the CSV file, then print the name that I just got and go +1. So if you run through this, we went 1 through 10, and all of a sudden I've got 1 through 10 over here for my file. So this might be useful to like put the date of your file if you're going to run something on a schedule, and that way you always know you're going to create a new file with a unique name because you have a unique date. And you also have the name of the file is going to mean something to you, where this iterator didn't really, right? Okay, so now that I made way too many files, I'm going to iterate and delete them. So this is quite simple. Instead of writing to a CSV, I'm going to use file.remove to remove them all. And voila, they're gone. So that was nice. You don't have to run this because case sample's still there. So, okay, cool. Now let's just read the CSV to make sure it's got what we want in it. So it is, right? I've got my beautiful record there.
Hey, Crush, can we go back up to the iterative? Okay, so we went over this for folks who were here for like the per package and a few other like formula function classes that we had. I think the one piece that we didn't talk about is the SEP. So SEP equals, and then you just gave it like a no space.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So that part, if I'm not mistaken, right, is just saying whenever you make these, don't put a space between sample and 1. Just like put 1 right after the word sample.
Yes, exactly. So this is just telling you what to put between the things that you're pasting together, right? And I put nothing, so they're jammed together. So it's ksample1.csv with no spaces. Mm-hmm. But if I put a space here and I run the same thing, now you can see the same version with spaces, right? In a way that, not so beautiful because there is an extra space between the end of the string that is the file name and then the extension, which I didn't love. That's why I went to the no space. It's probably a better way, but you can put anything in here, like R is cool. And now we're just going to have a bunch of files that have R is cool every gap between characters. So probably not useful. Don't do that, but you get the idea.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Just wipe these so you can see things a little cleaner. Okay, and then I should create my base one, and then I'm going to get it. So good. Now notice I did not specify a file path. Again, it always defaults to where your working directory is, so it's just creating it in the same place as my notebook. The working directory, I should have said at the beginning, it's not always going to be home Javian. It's going to be wherever the file is that you're working in. Our studio might have like one that is more universal, but from the perspective of JHub, it's wherever the notebook is. So if I move this notebook to projects or schedule tasks, the home directory, if I ran get WD, would be home Javian projects or home Javian jobs or whatever, right?
So in our studio, it's the same exact recall. So we use the same function, get working directory. Is there also a way in Jupyter Notebook to run set working directory like you can in R?
I didn't try that, but I imagine there probably is.
Okay. Yeah, because sometimes we do it to make sure that we the working directory is clear.
Is this how you do it, right?
Yep. Exactly like that.
Cannot change. Okay, so maybe it doesn't like me doing that.
Okay.
You have to try this out a little more than in the 2 seconds here, but yeah, it doesn't seem like it's enough.
But I guess like even if we can't set the working directory, knowing that the working directory is where the notebook is, and then providing file paths that just direct us from where that working directory is.
Yeah, and you could, like, for example, save the working directory as a string, and then you're always calling the right one, right? Stuff like
Okay.
that. So if you move the file around, everything still works.
Okay.
As like everything else.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So a couple other little things that you could try to do. You can rename the file. So we have ksample here, and so I've given that here, and I'm going to rename it to my beautifully creative name, ksample renamed. So now the file's gone, and it's replaced with another file called ksample renamed. That gives you the output of true just as it's successful. Fun fact, you can also just change the type of the file doing the same thing by changing the extension. So CSV is a comma delimited, right? So you could open this in Excel. A text file is a different kind of file, and you can see the icon changed when I did this. And you could probably open this in Excel, but it's not designed for that. And now when I run read lines, I can read this. I mean, R is smart enough. You can actually read this using read CSV too, but just a fun thing there. So might be useful if you're like intaking Excel files and you need to turn them into CSVs. Sometimes that can break processes, but if you just run this, it should fix the problem. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to my original name, and then I'm going to show a little bit about copying. So you can copy the file, and here, actually, let's do this in 2 little stages. First, we're just going to copy it right where it is, and you can see I got a new file. It's called test copy, right? Now, if I keep running this, I don't get more versions of that file because it's just overriding the existing test copy file. I would have to give it a new name or perhaps iteratively declare names so that I can make 10 copies of it or whatever if I need to do that. But file.copy is also the way you can, actually, that's why it says false, by the way, because it did not successfully copy there. This file is already there. So if you want to move a file, you can use the same method. So I'm going to move it to this Isilon folder, and you can see there's no test copy there right now. But if I copy it this way, nothing, well, this thing was already here, but now in Isilon, there's also test copy, right? So this is the best, well, I won't say best because I'm not an expert here, but it seemed like a convenient way and the way that was recommended in my research for moving files around using R.
This is super helpful. I like this.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about this Isilon thing. There's a reason that this folder exists here. You'll notice I'm in the immunizations UAT scheduler, and you will see this folder in all the UAT versions of the schedulers. So you can see it in the communicable disease UAT as well. Now, what we've done here is a little bit of folder and directory wizardry. So I'll kind of talk about that in a bit because it might be useful to people to know. Just to step back and give us a little bit of context, folders in a computer can be stored in many different places, right? So I have my local drive, I guess that's Windows C, right? And that's got my program files and my downloads folder and whatever else. But then what we also have are these network drives. And they're called network drives because they are not actually on my computer. They're on a network. Well, I connect through a network to machines that another team operates, and that those machines house my files, right? Just like Google Drive, Google has all your documents on their hard drives, and you just access them by going to the website. Same thing here. These files are housed on OIT servers over, I forget where they put them, but OIT servers on premises somewhere, and you connect to them over the VPN and you're able to see their folders, right? This process of connecting to a network drive is sometimes called mounting a drive, right? So you can mount local drives if you like, and then you can mount really anything, and you just call it map network drive. And then if you follow these prompts, you can provide different a location on the network or in your machine that you want to connect to, and then you can go from there. So like this can be a useful way to make quick shortcuts and so forth. In fact, if you look at my network drives, you can see that actually these are all nested in each other. They all start with the path dphe.local and then \dseed. So this one is dseed/common, this one is dseed/data, and this one is dseed programs distserve, right? Now, if I wanted to, I could go to this data folder, and let's say, for example, that I really liked this particular folder called DLH for no real reason. I could map that drive directly, and I would just do that like this, dphe.local/dseed/data/DLH. I won't bother them with that. And if you had special credentials, you could provide them. And if fate smiles upon me, I now have the Z drive, which is dseed data DLH, right? So it's actually just a subfolder of this data. And all I did was, in effect, make myself a shortcut to get to that folder, right? Now, the drive that what we did here is we took the server that runs the Jupyter Hub scheduler, which has its own file storage analogous to a local machine storage, right? So that's what all these folders and files are. They're over there in the Jupyter Hub Cloud folder structure. And we mounted a network drive. We named it Isilon, probably erroneously, might change that. And that one is mounted to each of these subfolders of the DLH folder. So the immunization folder here is the same as this Isilon folder here. And they are literally the same, that we're just kind of peering through a window from the JHub scheduler to look at the folder by clicking in here. And you can see that because the contents of the folders are identical, right? This folder is like a hidden folder, so it didn't get copied, but we've got this folder, test copy, test me. And in fact, you can even create a folder in here or a file in here. So if I make a new text file and I say, call this mirrored or something, in about a minute here, you saw the new text document show up. Once I save the name of it, it'll change to mirrored, and I can write some stuff in there and call it, hey, isn't this cool, right? And save this file, hey, isn't this cool, right? And over here, I can say, yes, it really is. Save this. And over here in my text file, oh, come on, maybe give me 1 second. Let's open it again. Yes, it really is. So these are kind of going back and forth, mirroring one another. And this would be a nice way to, if you wanted to export things to these folders, to the network drives, I should say, you could easily do so. They would just land in what is called the K drive right now in the subfolder therein. Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
Okay, wrapping my head around it a little bit more. So the window you have open right now is that is a window from your local PC, not the virtual machine.
Correct. This is File Explorer as opened from my local machine.
Okay. And you were able to create a connection to this drive using the Isilon folder, right? So let's say you're on two separate computers. One is on the virtual machine and one is on your regular computer. They're going to talk to each other in real time using this process. How did you make the Isilon folder connect back to that drive?
To this drive here on the, okay.
And do you have to make that shortcut first before that works? Or is that more so just like a fun thing you can do?
No, I was just doing that to demonstrate the process of mapping a drive.
Okay.
So okay, let me just let's step back for 2 seconds. So there are 3 folder structures involved here. There is my local machine, right? So that's my downloads and so forth. And actually, well, it's involved in some sense. There is OIT's network drives that we access over the VPN, right? And then there is the Jupyter Hub schedulers folder structure, right? And what's going on here is obviously there's a link from my local file structure to OIT's network drives. That's what you're seeing here, And then we created the same link from the Jupyter Hub network folder structure to OIT's network drives. And since we're both looking at the same folders, whatever happens, I can see from both sides of that, right? So if I go on my local machine and I go to the File Explorer and I go to the DLH folder, the one that is mapped over there, and I specifically the immunization one, this folder, these files are housed on a certain file, on a certain hard drive over in OIT land, and I'm accessing them from my local machine. And this is the same folder in OIT land, but accessed through the Jupyter Hub scheduler platform.
Gotcha. So is this, so in the K drive, you have a folder named Data Lakehouse, and in UAT right now, you're using that as what the Isilon folder is mapping to in the Jupyter Hub. And that, I assume, is some OIT/resultant magic happening in the background to create that folder and create that connection. It's nothing we can do on our side.
Correct. You cannot map it
Okay.
yourself. What had to happen is we had to get a service account from OIT and grant it access to the right folders. They make the folders and blah, blah, blah. And then we have to get the resultant had to get that service account plugged into the startup script for the Jupyter Hub scheduler and then mount the drive automatically whenever it starts up. And then, yeah.
So my next question. So you know how you can actually map Google Drive just the same way that we map our OAT drives? Does that process also work?
I have not tried that.
Yeah, because sometimes if I'm running a local thing and I don't really want to deal with Google Sheets in our studio, I'll just output it like it's a file path to my mapped Google Drive. Because I think, yeah.
That's a really cool idea, and there's nothing in principle stopping us, from at least investigating that whether you could mount a Google Drive to the JHub scheduler.
Yeah.
The only thing is, of course, the JHub scheduler is running under its own service account, so it would have to be a Google Drive that account has access to, right? So,
right.
That's something you're familiar with at this point. So,
yeah, for sure. Okay. Very cool.
Okay, well, I've probably taken up more time than I anticipated, but you can kind of see that mirroring there. Hopefully, we're going to build that out a little more. We have to manage the permissions on these folders. Probably in the long run, we'll actually just mount the main DLH one. That way you could potentially share across teams and access each other's folders. But more to come there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.